Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stewart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and listening. And we have a lot of things going on behind the scenes. And Larry, how are you doing up there on the mountaintop?
Oh, just watching Fox Business. And by the way, they just had a headline come on Intel report here at 7 o'clock, said that they're calling now for a Russia-U.S. showdown in Venezuela.
Really? Well, this is interesting. There's a lady, she was an older woman, 90 years old, from Norway, way back in 1968. She'd had a vision of what was coming, and I want to read part of that because we're going to focus on Venezuela tonight. Basically, a lot of things will probably hit tomorrow night on Israel. That's another hot spot. In fact, there are hot spots all over when it really comes right down to it. I'm only going to read part of this. I saw the time, she says, just before the coming of Jesus and the outbreak of the Third World War. I saw the events with my natural eyes. I saw the world like a kind of globe. I saw Europe, land by land. I saw Scandinavia. I saw Norway. I saw certain things that would take place just before the return of Jesus and just before the last calamity happens. A calamity the likes of which we have never before experienced. There are 4 waves to this, she says. First, before Jesus comes and before the Third World War breaks out, there will be a detente like we have never had before. There will be peace between the superpowers in the East and the West, and it will be a long peace. Then number 2, in this period of peace, there will be disarmament in many countries, also in Norway, and we are not prepared when the war comes. The Third World War will begin in a way no one would have anticipated, and from an unexpected place. In other words, it's going to take people by surprise that it is actually the beginning of the war. A lukewarmness without parallel will take hold of the Christians, a falling away from true living Christianity. Christians will not be open for penetrating preaching. They will not, like in earlier times, want to hear of sin and grace, law and the gospel, repentance and restoration. There will come a substitute instead, prosperity and happiness Christianity. Well, that's exactly what the Matthew says about in the parable of the sower. And she says, TV will be filled with such horrible violence that it teaches people to murder and destroy each other. It will be unsafe in our streets. Many will copy what they see. There will not only be one station on TV, there will be filled with many stations. People from poor countries will stream into Europe. It's already happening. Okay, then he says, the tears started streaming from the old woman's eyes down her cheeks. I will not see it, she said, but you will. Then suddenly Jesus will come, and the Third World War will break out. It will be a short war. All that I have seen of war before is only child's play compared to this one, and it will be ended with nuclear atom bomb. The air will be so polluted that one cannot draw one's breath. It will cover several continents, America, Japan, Australia, and the wealthy nations. Boy, that sounds like we are surrounded and taken out. This is really bad. She says the water will be ruined. We can no longer till the soil, obviously radioactivity. The result will be that only a remnant will actually remain and survive. The remnant in the wealthy countries will try to flee to the poorer countries, but they will be as hard on us as we were on them. And then she adds at the end, the one who has his sins forgiven and has Jesus as Savior and Lord is safe. So anyway, there you go. Let's start with Venezuela. What have you got on the latest on that? And it seems to tie into Trump, a national emergency declaration, martial law, et cetera, et cetera. What have you got?
Well, I can't really vet this at the moment. I had called you a little earlier. This report came in on Smart News, breaking news on my phone. It says exclusive, and I cannot vet this, so I can't tell you it's true. It says in a leak, the White House is preparing a draft of a national emergency order, which identifies $7 billion for a wall. The executive plan is to bypass Congress. I really can't vet that, Stewart. It's not out really publicly all that much, but I did get it on my phone, so you can comment on it like you would wish to, and then we can go to Venezuela.
Well, that issue with the wall, it seems to me that this is a diversionary thing that they're just keeping going while something else is going on in the background. Now, you've mentioned him before. I don't remember what his name is, but he's on YouTube. And he's been talking about this Venezuelan buildup of ships and all kinds of things going on down there.
Yeah, his name is Florida McKee, M-A-Q-U-I-S, Florida M-A-Q-U-I-S on YouTube.
So the latest would indicate a massive amount of ships and probably even troops on the ground, from what he's saying.
Well, he's been working this for a few months and talking about cloaked ships and hidden ships and satellites not recording U.S. assets and et cetera, allies in the region of the Caribbean. And, we've received reports of groups of ships off Grenada and then off the coast of Venezuela. Also reported data on special ops and other militaries training in Brazil, to be used in a Venezuelan possible invasion. So, and that's the interesting thing is John Bolton and I think Trump both have made mention that no options off the table with Venezuela, which that would leave the military option on the table.
Yes, it certainly would, and of course that would involve Russia and China and who knows what other outfits. Probably North Korea has troops there as well. We know China's involved. We know Russia's involved. In fact, what was that report that said that Russia was given one of the islands over there in part payment or repayment, I guess one could say. Russia has invested millions of dollars over there, as has China. And we had those two Soviet high-tech bombers come in there as well and land. They didn't stay very long, but it was definitely a statement to the United States, and we have other statements on here as well. And I think the reason I bring it up now is because I'm wondering if this drafting of an emergency martial law system, which is basically what it is, and the UN operations, and there's a lot about Donald Trump nobody knows about, and I don't want to get into it here, but people need to keep their eyes open as to what's actually going on. And this Venezuelan thing, when you look at that woman's prophecy, might just be exactly that. I've gotten conflicting reports, Larry. This is from Hal Turner. The United States government has ordered all of its personnel to evacuate from Venezuela immediately and is telling all American citizens in that country they should leave now. But then I heard on the opposite end of that the diplomats were ordered to stay, and that if anybody harmed them, that would be an act of war, basically. What's the latest on that? Are they leaving? Are they staying? Or doesn't anybody know?
Well, they're carrying a special right now on the intel report on Fox Business, but not a lot of people get that. And their total coverage suddenly is Venezuela and the revolution. And this is what's interesting. I read the same data, but the latest seems to be, Stewart. As a matter of fact, John Bolton's on with Trish Reagan now, giving a statement and saying that they want to see a peaceful transition of power in Venezuela to the new president that the U.S. backs, not Maduro, who, of course, Russia backs, and that they're very concerned about the citizens currently in Venezuela. Now, there's been an order to leave Venezuela immediately by the U.S. To its citizens and to non-necessary embassy staff. However, the diplomats have been told to stay in place. And a report that I saw said that Maduro was sending the troops into the streets, and there was a comment that if Maduro directs the Venezuelan army to oust U.S. diplomats from the U.S. embassy in Venezuela, it will be an act of war.
Wow. So we have to take this in part, I suppose, with the Armageddon script, the recent activity in the South China Seas, the threats that China has made against Taiwan, what's going on in the borders over there with Israel, and the threats, which we'll probably get into. If not tonight, for sure, we'll get into them tomorrow. It seems like we're headed for war. I mean, this is part of the plan, I believe. And, of course, a war, that gives Trump, he doesn't need a national emergency as far as the border is concerned. They might be using that as an excuse. But a war breaks out in Israel or a war breaks out in Venezuela, he can declare a national emergency. And we go basically under martial law at that point in time. And the Bill of Rights and Constitution are suspended. So, I don't know. The elected leader of Venezuela's Congress has declared the presidency vacant and has exercised constitutional authority to assume leadership of the nation. But Maduro is not leaving. And I guess he has the military, does he not, behind him?
Oh, absolutely, Stewart. There were reports yesterday that the U.S. hoped and were working with the opposition to try to lure the military away from Maduro. However, the generals came out late this evening and announced solidarity with Maduro and Russia and China and the Iranians that are in Venezuela. And now, Stewart, get this, a NATO country has gone to the side of Maduro. Erdogan in Turkey has announced he is standing behind and supporting the Maduro regime alongside Russia and others. So, boy, we are really coming into a confrontation there if something doesn't change quickly.
Yeah, it says here, Secretary of State Pompeo vowed that appropriate action will be taken if any U.S. diplomats are harmed. Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, and Paraguay and Peru also all recognize the opposition leader. However, on the other side, we have Russia, China, Turkey, Iran, North Korea, and who knows who else. This got to be a collision. So, are we dumb enough to try to take him out militarily? I mean, if he has the military on his side, you're not going to unseat him unless you go into put boots on the ground. Excuse me. What do you think?
Well, Stewart, when you talk about that, you have to take into consideration all of the preparations for a number of months, 2 or maybe almost 3. And I've been sharing the data with you, and we wasn't sharing it out in general public, but between you and I, we were talking, and remember all the troops, foreign troops that were gathering and
yes.
training for a possible invasion, and also special ops to go in and take out leadership, et cetera, et cetera. This may be part of the playbook, and I'd like your opinion here. This is what's interesting, and I think you watched the video. Ben Danoon was talking from insiders inside Israel that were sharing with him that the very next nation for a global toppling was Venezuela.
Yeah, we just, according to the Bible, the United States of Babylon just cannot, they're obsessed with toppling nations, and evidently they can't get away from it, and so it ends in disaster for us. We have spoiled many, many nations, and I remember the guy who was head of NATO, what was his name? Some time ago. Anyway, when he got ousted or quit or whatever, but anyway, came over here, nice guy, general, one of our top generals, and he said he was told. Yeah, go ahead. Wesley Clark.
His name Clark? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wesley Clark. He was told that we were going to topple, I think it was 5 nations. Now, I wonder if Venezuela was included there, and he just didn't say anything. But one by one over there in the Middle East, like Libya, Iraq, et cetera, Syria now, that's the attempt anyway, and on it goes. And as the Bible says, do you not think, Babylon, that these people that you have spoiled will not come and spoil you? So, yeah, we're headed into, I believe, the final time. And what's interesting is that this last supermoon on March 20th falls on the equinox, number 1, and it falls on Purim. Isn't that interesting?
Oh.
It's a holiday for Israel and the Jews, but it's actually the time when, remember, Esther purified herself for 3 days before going into the king's chamber, where he accepted her. And that's kind of an allusion to the bride of Christ. And it's also the time when the trap for the Jews was reversed. And the ones who had set up the killing of the Jews were killed themselves. So it's very, very interesting that this is a super moon on that very date with everything that's happening right now, not only in Venezuela, but also over there in Israel and the threats that are being made over there. Anyway, it says Maduro is going to hang on with his military. So I don't see how this is going to work. And it says here, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention, you said you didn't see how it was going to work, but what may be a checkmate, maybe this military base Russia was building, and of course I told you how it had been reported that Russia was owed a considerable sum of money by Maduro that he had borrowed and used to pay his army off for some time, and he couldn't pay it back. He defaulted on that loan, and how he had given Putin that entire island to build a military base. Now, I'm wondering, Stewart, if Putin now has been given that island in exchange for all of that money that was owed, would that not make that location possibly Russia?
Yes, it would. I don't know if any deeds or transfers have been made, but yes, absolutely. That would then be Russian territory. So, which complicates the matter even more. This is what President Donald Trump promised to use the full weight of U.S. economic and diplomatic power to push for the restoration of Venezuelans' democracy. The people of Venezuela have courageously spoken out against Maduro and his regime and demanded freedom and the rule of law, he said in a statement. Now, basically, Russia said in return, well, you're meddling, and China said the same thing, you're meddling in a sovereign nation. You don't have any right to be there. You haven't been invited. Whereas China and Russia, this is the same thing in Syria, where we're in full violation of international law. Israel is likewise. They can say, well, we're protecting ourselves. But some of this stuff doesn't look like it's necessarily for protection. It looks like they're deliberately pushing for a war with Iran openly at this point. So anyway, like you said, China and Russia are deeply involved. Now, if they have the island, if Russia has the island and we get involved there, that'd be an act of war. I'm sure Putin would call that an act of war. And here's what Moscow said. Russia warned the U.S. on Thursday not to intervene militarily in Venezuela, saying such a move would trigger a catastrophe. Moscow will stand with Venezuela to protect its sovereignty and the principle of non-interference in its domestic affairs. Asked about the prospect of U.S. military intervention in Venezuela, whoever this guy is, Rabakov or whatever, said Washington should steer well clear. We warn against that, he said. We consider that would be a catastrophic scenario that would shake the foundations of the development model we see in Latin America, which, of course, is a communist takeover. So, what do you think? It just looks bad.
Yeah, Stewart, almost any direction you look looks bad, and the perfect timing for all of this, I guess you could say multiple crisis situations, Stewart, is when the American government is absolutely non-functional.
Yes, which it is right now. And it'd be an ideal time in the northern climes, and we're heading into some extremely cold weather for an EMP attack as well. I'm very kind of concerned that could happen anytime now. And I just can't imagine what damage that would do to people out on the highways when it's 20 below zero and they're stuck 100 or 1,000 miles away from home, no way to even get home. So, and they have openly said they're working on such things. And here's a headline, we're getting into Iran, to launch massive war drills. This just came out on Drudge. Iranian military leaders announced on Thursday that the Islamic Republic will be launching a massive set of war drills later this week that will include the regime's army ground forces and some 12,000 combat and mobile forces, according to Iran's state-controlled media. So is this in preparation for the closing of the Strait of Hormuz like they have threatened to do?
Well,
or wipe out Israel like they threatened to do?
Yeah, we are aware, it's not in the news particularly, but if you look at the intelligence from different countries, there's a force of over 10,000 pro-Iranian militias sitting inside Iraq, right on the Syrian border, with armor, and this includes tanks and et cetera. And this belongs to the Iranians, and of course there's I think 80-something thousand Iranian troops already in Syria, plus more on the way. And then if you'll remember, the information that had slipped out about the closing of the Strait of Hormuz in or around possibly February the 11th, which, Stewart, is not actually that far away. So this war, it makes me wonder, Stewart, if this war drill coming out next week is really a drill, or if this is maybe Daniel 8 beginning to go into operation and the closing of the Straits of Hormuz, and there's another crisis that we're not prepared for.
Yeah, it's kind of like your friend that had the vision of wars everywhere. They just suddenly started, and of course, World War III is basically everywhere. And like that lady said, it's over very quickly. And the Lord, is, she said, comes back just as that thing starts. And that's kind of in parallel with David Wilkinson. That's what he said. When the nuclear bombs were falling on the United States, in a very surprise attack, nobody expected it, whatever, out of nowhere, and suddenly, and the Lord took his people home at that very moment.
Well, yeah, you know, one thing I'd like to really tell people out there, I know that it may not make much impact because people in America, you know, they're complaining because now they're telling them, the Democrats are saying it's not even safe to fly because of the shutdown. But, Stewart, if people had any wisdom at all, with the intelligence that we're telling them, this is absolutely not a time to be far from home or travel for the next, I don't know, couple of weeks or more maybe.
Yeah, but people are going to do what they want to do. They're not going to stop doing. And that's obvious they won't, and you can't tell them not to, because they just get angry if you try to warn people like that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're coming up from the 21st through to the end of, or the very beginning, I guess we could say, or the end of 70th year and going into the 71st year of Israel, is a high warning period of time, and because we don't know exactly when, I shouldn't say what, or when sudden destruction cometh, and with what's going on in Israel, which we'll get into tomorrow night, it appears to be even worse than what we're being told. And remember, folks, that Netanyahu, like any leader, wants to remain in power. And that's a good reason to go to war. And we also have a world economy that's failing rapidly, and you're not hearing that anywhere either. But it is. China's economics are folding up, and anyway, it's a very dangerous time to be out and about any major distance. Anything else you got, Larry? We got about a minute left here.
Well, I was going to say that there's certainly a ramping up of the threat of an EMP, either regional or larger than that, in the days ahead, and even the DAOs have been warning for the last week or so of an EMP possible strike somewhere, and so people just need to be aware of that and have your goodies ready.
Yeah, here's a headline, and it's curious at the timing of the headline. China, Russia building super EMP bombs for blackout warfare. Makes total sense. They do not declare, they don't consider that a nuclear strike either, according to the article. We get into that Friday. Folks, this is really serious business. If you get caught out, you're caught out. Can't tell you to stay home, obviously. We don't know when this thing's coming down. But we are moving through a period of bad times between now and the 14th of May in Israel's restoration through the Jacob's trouble and Daniel's 70th week. Going to be a bad time for everyone. Thanks a lot, Larry, for coming on. And thanks, everybody, for listening. And heads up, take care of yourselves. Make sure you got water and food, the two essentials to get through a couple of weeks of bad stuff, particularly with no power and cold weather. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you tomorrow night. Take care.